Hello, welcome to Duppy Aquatics. I've been meaning to make a video for ages. Today's video, as the title will no doubt say, is how to actually look after guppies. I find generally on YouTube there's only ever basic general care videos on guppies, but because they're pretty much the only fish I keep with Endlers, I thought I should do a video on how to actually look after guppies and have them succeed. Because it seems to be one of the most asked questions on most Facebook pages, at least in the ones that I'm in Australia, is what's wrong with my guppies, how do you look after them, why do they always die, etc, etc. So I thought I'd better just address some of these things in today's video. I have, oops, tripping over all the crap in this room. I have some sick fish which I will showcase, just because that's one of the things that a lot of people don't know what to do is when their guppies get sick, is how to take care of them. This is actually the assorted guppy tank, or the cull tank, so anything that's not a perfect fish from my pure lines go in here. I also got given some fish recently by someone, which is basically a death sentence if you don't have the place to quarantine your fish. But as we're coming into winter at the moment, I didn't have any tanks available for quarantining new fish, so I chucked them in here, and unsurprisingly it's made these fish sick with a fungus. So that's why there's a very blue hue when you compare the tanks side by side. One's got more of an algae tinge, one's got a blue tinge. That's because I've been treating with methylamine blue. So they're just having a break from their first treatment, and I'll have to treat them again in the next day or so after they've had some baby brine shrimp as a food. So I think that probably is a good segue to start into what a healthy guppy looks like. So if you look here, this female is a really good example of what a healthy female guppy should look like. Nice round stomach. She's quite clearly pregnant by how round she is, but you can see there's a slight taper to the spine, and that's because she's so heavily pregnant. You'll see some of the other ones have got more straight spines. That's generally what you're looking for. You're trying to avoid roller coaster spines, like this one. When she turns to the side, you'll see she's got a very zigzag, like the stock market. So you see that hump just before her fin in a zigzag, so she's going to have to go into the cull tank once they're no longer sick. And that could be a couple of things. She could have been attacked as a fry, and that has broken her spine in some spot. It could also be from being a pure line strain, even though these have recently been crossed out, which is why some of the males haven't got perfect tails. When you're breeding guppies, you'll find that you'll encounter all sorts of interesting defects if you're breeding pure lines and you haven't introduced enough genetic diversity. So these koi guppies up here are the most probably inbred of the ones that I have, and that's just because I haven't had a chance to source some new blood for them. So there'll be a few in here that'll have to be removed as culls. As you can see, this one right here, this male, bit of a bent spine, so he'll be coming out as well. So when you're looking for guppies, you're looking for ones that are swimming well. So this male here was swimming quite well. It's got a very straight spine. The only thing I don't like too much about this line of guppy is you'll see how slender. So this one here, when he turns to the side, even this one here, you see how slender the body is. So it hasn't got a very stocky body, which means as they get older, if they have bigger tail fins, they struggle more with swimming. So a good example of a male with a straight spine with a more stocky body will be one of my Dumbo ears. So this is a Dumbo ear mosaic, and you can see how he's got a very stocky body compared to his fin, which allows him to be a stronger swimmer. And that's what you're looking for, especially for the male guppies, is that sort of body shape, so that they don't end up being bad swimmers and more likely to have issues if you've got a power head filter, in terms of getting fatigued, not being able to get enough food, and then ultimately dying pretty quickly after introducing into a tank. So for the females, you're looking for that nice plump round body. Sometimes you will see females like this. So she's got more of a flat stomach, but you can see there's still a round shape to it, and that's because she's actually recently given birth. There's a whole bunch of fry at the back here you can see, so that'll be from her and a couple of other females popping at the same time. So that's one thing you're looking for. This is a really good example of a nice looking female. When she turns to the side, see a nice round shape to the front and straight spine, and that's what you're looking for your females. And males, nice thick body, straight spine. The fins on some of these aren't spectacular because I don't breed for the biggest fins, I breed for the best body shape, and that's what you should be doing when you're breeding guppies, is breed for body shape before you're breeding for the finnage. So these dragon guppies here, most of the males are pretty stocky, and then I've started working on the fins, so they're getting that nice big round fin to go with a stronger body shape. And this tank is absolutely disgusting because I have a sun LED light in here, and it's not ironically named sun, it's the power of the sun in your LEDs. So if you want to culture green water, buy a sun. Same thing for Endlers. So these are Endler fry. You can see they're all plump because I feed my fish a lot. I like food, I assume the fish like food, so that's what they get fed. This female here is going, well actually everything in this tank is going through a deworming process at the moment. So I got gifted these by a friend. They had Camellinus redworms. You can probably see if it focuses on her. If you look at the anal part of the fish down here, you'll see a cyst as well as some worms, depending on how good the camera's recording. And that's with the levamisole treatment. It's expelling all the worms. This female here is starting to get a rounder shape to the stomach since I've put the treatment in there, because obviously all the worms are being expelled out of her. So it's really important to quarantine your fish and do a deworming treatment, or buy them from someone who has done that already, because if you get Camellinus redworms into your aquarium, it's pretty much a death sentence for all your guppies if you don't take care of it. By the time you're seeing the worms coming out of the fish, you're getting to the stage of you're going to lose quite a few of them when you do treat them, just because at that stage the infestation is quite bad. And the reason why the worms have the red color is actually because they're a nematode that's feeding on the blood of the fish, not just taking the stuff out of the gut like a tapeworm would. So if you had the choice between having your tank infested with tapeworms or Camellinus redworms, take the tapeworms. It's easier to treat them because nematodes are notoriously hard to get rid of. Doesn't matter if you're talking about your garden, where they're destroying root systems of plants, or you're talking about your fish, even in people, just nematodes are the worst. So there's a good example of a really nice male on the right there. These three other males have got too much of a slender body, so you can see the droopage in the spine happening already. When it comes to feeding guppies, one of the most important things is to give them a very varied diet. Don't just feed them flake food. So everything I have in here gets fed a flake food, but not only a flake food. So every tank will get fed at least 2 to 3 times a week with live baby brine shrimp, or if I had them, I'd feed frozen bloodworm cubes into these tanks, or freeze-dried blackworms. All of those are going to be great for maintaining guppies' health. If you only feed them a flake food, generally it'll be spirulina based, and if it's only spirulina based flake food, you're going to find that a lot of them are going to start wasting away, which can be mistaken for internal parasites. Sometimes it is, but usually it's they're not getting enough protein in their diet. They'll start wasting away and they'll die reasonably quickly, especially when people have their guppies kept at temperatures like 28, 29 degrees. I've had some people keeping their guppies at 30 degrees Celsius. I don't know what it is in Fahrenheit. I'm sorry, I use the metric system. I had people message me asking about gallon tanks, and it's just a big question mark of I don't know what that is, sorry. So I recommend keeping your guppies about 22 degrees Celsius. None of my tanks in here, as you can see, none of them have a heater in there, and that's because even though the outside temperature here can drop as low as 16, 14 degrees at night, inside it's probably only going to drop down to 17 degrees during the night, and the fish may not love it, but they were not going to die at that temperature overnight. Usually, if you got them next to a window and that's going to happen, then you probably would want to have a heater in the tank, but I keep mine all in unheated tanks because I know the temperature is not going to get below that 16 degree point inside, especially if I close all the doors, the lights being on during the day, and have the lids closed. The tanks will stay at a very stable temperature and it won't have a very big temperature flux. So I don't recommend keeping your fish hot at that 30 degree or 26. I'd keep them 22 to 24 is ideal. That's all you need to have them at, and that has an added benefit of the metabolism of the fish is not going to be so high that they're going to die of starvation a lot faster. So you find the fish will grow faster at a higher temperature, but they're also going to die a lot quicker at a higher temperature. So I never recommend having your fish at that temperature unless you're breeding something like discus or blue rams. There's generally very few fish that want to be kept that hot. So for my flake food, you can see here that the crude protein is 44% and crude fat at 3%. So that's pretty good. I mean, if you can get 50% or 55% protein for your flake food for your guppies, that's probably ideal. But one of the best things to do is you want to look at the ingredients. I don't know about other countries, but in Australia, they must list the ingredients in order of prevalence. So fish meal, shrimp meal being the first two ingredients is a very good sign. Soy meal, not that keen about. I would have preferred the fish oil to be a bit higher up, but it is what it is. I've been feeding them this fish food for 2 years, which is the Pisces brand one. And I've been having really good results with that. So if you're gonna feed a flake food, make sure you just read what the ingredients are. You want one that's gonna say fish meal or shrimp meal as the first two ingredients. You can use a pellet food as well. Generally, guppies don't care what you feed them. You can feed them pellets, you can feed them flake, and they'll take it all. But just make sure at least once a week, preferably 2 to 3 times a week, you are feeding them with a higher protein, such as a bloodworm, blackworm, or brine shrimp. You can get it frozen, you can do it live. Any way you do it, it's going to give you really good results. So you can see like the size of my female guppies here, they're a couple of years old now, and they absolutely dwarf the males. And this is probably the standard size what you'd find in a pet store. So you can see the size difference between those females there. So that's what happens when you keep them at a lower temperature. Because the fish are going to live longer, they're going to grow bigger, you're going to get more fry out of them. So there is a method to the madness of not keeping them in heated aquariums or keeping them at a lower temperature to what 90% of people are going to keep their fish at. One thing that I do regularly, so these fish here, you can see they're kind of lethargic compared to some of the other fish, and they're just more occupying the same spot. That's because I've got a dewormer going through the tank at the moment. Not that they're showing signs of having something per se, but when you bring fish in from the outside tubs, because anyone that's got fish as like an addiction, as clearly I do, and if you're watching the video, you may be well on your way to developing this addiction as well. You're going to hack the system, and in summer you're going to chuck your fish in ponds or tubs outside. But when you do that, you know, all sorts of things can get into the pond, so you don't want to be bringing, you know, worms into your aquariums just because you dewormed them before they went out. So I deworm them when they come back in for winter, just so then I'm making sure I'm always having the healthiest fish. Healthy fish will have more babies. More babies is the more better. Is the long and short of it when you're having guppies and you want a full tank of them. Down here is the Moscow Blues. You can see, again, really large female. She's just coming from the pond, and all the different sized ones here, they're congregating because when they see me, they know it's feeding time. You can see all different color qualities of the males. So this is a really nice Moscow blue. It's a lot darker. These ones are a lot lighter. But under the LED lights, I'll show their color way better as well. So you see that iridescence to them. So absolutely beautiful fish. If you don't have a Moscow guppy, I suggest getting Moscow blues to start with. Usually Moscow blacks are a bit easier to find, but I think the Moscow blues in a really nice planted aquarium with the light, you're going to see that really nice metallic iridescent shine to them. So that's just my opinion on them. When it comes to plants and guppies, there's no such thing as too many plants for a guppy tank, because all it's going to do is provide us a hiding spot for the fry, as well as keep the water clean. I always have LEDs for my tanks with guppies. You can use tube lights, they're going to be good as well, but the LEDs will show the color way better in most cases as well. Now, if you have guppies, one of the things to be aware of is watch the way they're swimming. That'll be a very good indicator of what their health is like. So you can see this one here is doing a waddle or a shimmy, where it's staying very much in the same spot but doing nearly exaggerated movements while it's swimming. That's a clear indication that there's something wrong. So if you have a few guppies in your tank that's swimming like that, there is an underlying issue. One of the best things to do if you're not sure what is happening, this is Oliver Knott branded one, but get a good quality marine salt. This one is almost like a powder salt, and put, you know, depending on what size tank, so every 10 liters you can put a tablespoon or a bit over a tablespoon of a good quality marine salt into there. Do that for your tank at whatever dose you think it will require. It's not going to kill your plants. In my experience, the plants aren't usually that sensitive to the salt at that level, but it can be a good way just to stop a fungal outbreak or white spot in its tracks before it happens. Even bacteria, if you're going to have a bacterial problem that's going to affect the fish, doing that with the salt can stop it before it actually becomes a problem and you need medicine. These ones are a bit too far gone to just use salt. I mean, I have added salt in there, then waited to see if there was any results. After a few days, the fish were getting worse, so I had to treat with methylene blue. They are getting a lot better now compared to what they were, because there's only a few fish that are shimmying and then some that are staying at the top. So this is another characteristic of fish that are sick, is they stay at the top like that. But you can see some are swimming around with a bit more vigor. I have treated them. The treatment was in there for a week. I've done a 50% water change, and now I'm just feeding them with some live baby brine shrimp every day for the next couple of days. Then I'm going to do a follow-up treatment, and that will solve the problem, I think. Sometimes with guppies you do have to make a hard call. So if this one here, I could see the fins have a slight hue to the sides of them. After I do the next treatment, if it doesn't get better, I probably will just cull that fish, just because it's not worth getting the tank reinfected again. Sometimes some fish, when they're wasting away, when they've got a really bad fungus, the best thing you can do to save your entire tank is get rid of and cull that one fish to save the rest of them. Because especially if you've got tanks like this absolutely full of fish, one fish being sick can, you know, destroy the entire tank. So I know it's unpopular to do in the hobby, but sometimes you got to do what you got to do to save everything. And especially for myself, this is not just a hobby, it's also my business. So I can't afford to risk everything for a couple of fish. So if they do get really bad, like you can see this male here, if the camera will focus, see that coloration around the tail fin here? That's a sign of the fungus eating away into the finnage. So the fish will let you know when they're unhappy or if there's something wrong. You've just got to be observant. The unfortunate thing for a lot of fish is when they get sick quickly, and it spreads in the tank very fast. And sometimes you think, oh, they were fine this morning, they're all sick tonight, and that's exactly how quickly it can move. But don't panic, just know it happens to everyone. There will be something you can do. So I always, the main two medicines I'd recommend everyone to have for guppies, methylene blue being one, Vamisol being a second one, and the holistic medicine to have is a good quality marine salt. Always treat with marine salt first, and then see before you go starting to add medicine to the tank, before you go adjusting the heater to being up higher if it's white spot or whatever. Sometimes you change too many factors in the tank and you're going to end up with more fish dying than if you just waited and see how it goes. So a lot of the time, things like white spot, just treat it with salt. Don't adjust the temperature, wait and see how it goes after a couple of days. If the fish are still eating well, they're still swimming well, but they've just got the white spots on them, I would just do the salt, keep feeding them. Generally the fish's own immune system will fight it off. If you see them getting worse, fin clamping, shimmying, then add in a white spot remedy or increase the temperature then. Don't do it all at the same time. Do it in stages because you want to stagger what you're doing for them. Otherwise you're going to put undue stress on the fish and that can crash your tank. And then you've just had one of the worst experiences you can have with sick fish is you've done all the right steps on paper, but you did them at the same time, put the fish into shock and lost the entire tank. So yeah, that's just my 25 years of fish keeping experience is slow and steady usually wins out with disease. Just address the problems one at a time, try one thing, see how it goes, then try the next thing. Don't do everything at the same time. So you'll see quite often Facebook people will say, oh, you need to increase temperature, you need to add this medicine, and you need to do a water change. People will do all of those things in an hour, and then you've just sent all your fish into shock. So the trick for treating fish is do it one step at a time. Don't panic. I know I panicked when I saw these fish getting sick, but you just got to do it slowly. I've only lost 2 fish out of here while they're being sick, so you know the results will speak for themselves. So down here are my chili endlers. Chili endlers are one of my favorite fish. I think in my experience endlers are a little bit easier to keep than guppies are because they seem to handle colder water better than guppies. So whereas guppies I would keep 22 to 24, I'd keep endlers at the same temperature, but I know if the temperature is going to go down to 18 at a more consistent level, they do seem to handle it way better than guppies can. And I don't know if that's because the endless live bearers are found in different spots in the wild, but it just seems to be something that I've noticed, and quite a few of my friends who keep endlers and guppies have noticed a similar thing as well. Endlers are also one of the fish that are generally more shrimp safe than guppies because the females don't get anywhere near as big as the female guppies. So these female chili endlers in here are pretty big for I suppose endlers. There are some other tanks in here that are maybe a little bit bigger. Like these are the Japan blues, which are absolutely stunning. This is Japan blue that actually didn't develop a fork tail, so there I'll have to separate him out. These are French blue stars in here. I have nowhere near as many as I once did, but yeah, they all have shrimp in these tanks. Not that you can tell because they're absolutely jam-packed full of Java moss or guppy grass and stuff like that. Endlers are also a fish that if you only have limited space, they can do well in a nano tank. If you want to start breeding a type of guppy or endler and you've only got room for one tank and you have to do it colony style, endlers will work really well because they don't seem to predate on their young as much as guppies do. So guppies I find will eat their babies way more readily than what Endlers will. But one thing I also noticed for Endlers is the males will get in front. So this one just at the back there was doing it just a second ago. He was just all the way at the back there. You'll see he is chasing a female, but he was also going in front of the female and extending out his fins, bending his spine and shimmying in front of her, like a courting behavior. I don't ever really notice that in guppies, but I do notice it for Endlers quite a lot. And I have been one of those people that's crossbred Endlers and guppies together just to see what happens. Generally, what happens when you cross Endlers and guppies is they just revert back to more of a wild type looking guppy. But when you do keep them in the same tank together, that courting behavior seems to be picked up by the male guppies as a learned behavior from the Endlers, and they will start doing that sort of dance in front of the females as well, which I thought was very interesting, because you usually see male guppies doing more so what these ones are doing, and they just chase the females to impregnate them, whereas the Endlers will get in front of them, they'll do a courting dance, then they'll impregnate the females. So that's just an interesting tidbit that I found, was that they can learn behaviors from the Endlers when they're kept in the same tank. They also seem to not eat the fry of their fish after being kept in with Endlers for a while as well. So that seems to be more of a learned behavior as well. My experience separating out a really heavily pregnant female. So all these blue Moscow guppy fry came from one female. It'll focus, there we are. And she was a medium-sized female, so there's not that many fish in there, but they all came from the one female. And you can see there's some down here that are quite small and some that are a bit larger. You do need to separate the larger ones from the smaller ones, even if you're feeding live baby brine shrimp, just because the bigger fish are always going to monopolize the food. They'll grow faster and you're going to end up with some fish that are way smaller. So it is important to actively separate the larger fish from the smaller fish. So even these ones as well, they're all born at the same time. This one has got obviously a swim bladder issue because it's struggling to swim, whereas the other ones are swimming quite well. And the larger ones obviously getting the most food, so I will have to separate those ones out. And as they're sexing out, it's always a good practice, if you've got the space, to separate males from females, because then the females will grow faster. They'll also grow larger than if you keep them together with the males. If you don't have the space, like generally I don't have the space to do that, so they just end up in the same tanks together anyway. You're still going to get pretty good results. Sorry if I sound like I've just ran a marathon. Bending down for whatever reason has made me extremely out of breath, because it's a sign I need to start going to the gym. This one in here, so this is how I outbreed my guppies. That's a... Where's the female? Female's up there. Nice big girl, and at the back there's a male. That male is one I ordered from the wholesaler. And then I gave him a treatment with the dewormer as well as the methamine blue to make sure he wasn't carrying a fungus, and I separated out one female. Once I have kept her in here for a month, if I see fry in this tank, that's fine. I'm going to leave her in for a little bit longer, because guppy females can actually store the sperm from males, and they only need to mate once to be perpetually pregnant for essentially the rest of their life. So I just wanted to make sure that he is the one that's fertilized the most babies before I separate her out into one of these tanks to drop the next lot of fry. And that's how I will generally outbreed my guppies. I'm too scared to order in some from the wholesalers, then just put them straight into my colony tanks, because I ordered 10 males, and out of 10 males, there's that one at the back that survived all of the quarantine procedures, because the wholesalers import their fish from overseas. They're not always from breeders. And that's usually why it's so hard to find good quality guppies, especially when you're only surrounded by chain stores. Like in Australia, we have Pet Barn, which is actually an American company, but I think in the States you guys have PetSmart or Petco or whatever it is. and you guys will probably having the same experiences where you're buying fish and then inside of a week they're dying. It's because they're coming from imported stock that haven't been taken care of correctly. They could have a disease that's not manifesting yet, and then it gets into your aquarium and it just crashes. So if possible, buy your stock from a local breeder. You're gonna usually get way better results than if you're going to the pet store. If you go to your local fish store, you can see whether or not they've got theirs from the wholesaler or if they're getting theirs from a breeder as well, just because, you know, they can get them from the wholesaler for essentially nothing. But the death, like the mortality rate when you get them from the wholesalers, like as you just saw there, there's 90% mortality rate. And it doesn't matter how many times I buy them from the wholesaler, how good of care I give them, I still get that sort of death rate when I get them from the wholesaler. So, you know, you just gotta put a lot of work into getting really good guppies. See, when people are charging, you know, $6, $7 for a guppy, that's why. It's because to get them to this stage, I've spent thousands of dollars on fish and years of trial and error. And sometimes it goes really wrong and you lose a lot of fish. You can get the breeders that are, oh, I've oopsed out a heap of fish for cheap. If you can, and you're just wanting a nice tank full of fish, just go on to, you know, Gumtree or wherever they're selling fish easily. Just go and get them from there. You're gonna have easier time than if you're going to the pet store and they're just crashing on you all the time. I've tried to be as thorough as I can in this video. If I've left anything out that you have a question about, just put a comment in the comments. I'll read it. It might take me a while, but I will get around to answering everyone's comments, because usually when I'm doing nothing, I'm doing absolutely nothing, so I'll just be on my phone and I'll answer people's questions. So yeah, that's what I think everyone needs to know about guppies, is feed them well with good quality fish food, high protein, at least 3 times a week. Make sure you're buying from a really good source, so a local breeder. Try to avoid chain stores for them. If you're having fish that are getting sick, the 3 things to keep for them are usually methylamine blue, having levamisole for any worms, and then as well as a really good quality marine salt, and that will get you out of 90% of issues with guppies. This blue light just behind me is a UV sterilizer. If you're running a sump filtration system for guppies, chuck a UV sterilizer in there and you can have crystal clear water, and you're not going to have to worry as much about disease either, because it's going to get rid of any of the disease from the water column. Also, with fancy guppies with the big tails, don't have a really big, like, high flow for the tank if you've got a power head, because that can put a lot of strain on the fish, especially the males as they're swimming. Endlers, it's not as much of an issue because they've got much smaller tails. So all of these tanks, bar 3 here, are just off air filtration. So low flow, best results if you're going to be breeding them. Endlers will do really well in a colony bred situation. Guppies, if you separate the fry or the heavily pregnant females, is probably your best way to get a high yield out of them. Keep the temperature about 22 to 24 degrees Celsius, and you shouldn't have an issue if you've done all those things. And you obviously know, keep the pH at 7, 7.5. Put some crushed coral in there if you're worried, and that's just going to help add some more calcium to the water. So I think that's everything you should need. Good luck.